Growth in the June quarter was 0.2% and just 1% through the year. This is consistent with the market's expectation for growth in our economy. This is the weakest growth since 2020.
Well, Jim Chalmers has just presented the worst economic growth figures in more than 30 years, since the deep recession of the early 90s. So the Treasurer had a few different things that he wanted to achieve in this press conference in Canberra just during lunchtime. The first thing that he wanted to say was to people that I feel your pain. I know that things are tough, that discretionary spending is really flat, that that people are struggling under the weight of high interest rates, high inflation, and these global uncertainties that are just making it harder for our exports. So he went out of his way to show that he's a caring fellow.
We've got a lot going for us, but we know that people are under substantial pressure. Almost 1 million jobs have been created on our watch. Inflation has halved from its peak in the year that we were elected. Real incomes are growing. Tax cuts are rolling out, and we're helping with the cost of living. But we know, and we see in this data, that people are still doing it tough, and that's why the cost of living remains our highest priority.
The next thing that he wanted to do, Jim Chalmers wanted to present big government as a saviour in all of this. He said that without public spending, there'd be no growth in the economy whatsoever. Now, do we want an economy where the government is the prime mover, or do we want an economy where the private sector, business investment, spending is really driving things as it has in the past? So this is really an odd situation where the government spending in state and federal budgets is really driving all the growth. Without that, we'd be going backwards. Population is also playing a part. Chalmers doesn't like to talk about population because he gets smashed by the opposition for running a big Australia policy with record levels of migration. In talking about government as saviour, Chalmers also put down two quite important markers about where the next election will be fought. We all know that cost of living is the main issue for voters at the moment. That's what they want government action to focus on. And he made it clear, he repeated it over and over, that government spending essentially was being driven by things like energy bill relief, childcare relief, rent relief, education relief. All of those things he tried to present as being addressing people's needs. But he also dropped in something else. He said part of the reason why there's been so much government spending is they're expanding the care economy, specifically the health sector. And we know from all the surveys of voters that health is going to feature in a big way in Labor's agenda for the election.
Without government spending, without growth in government spending, there'd be no growth in our economy at all. That is primarily health spending. Public final demand growth is still lower than what we saw under our predecessors, but it's making a useful contribution when it comes to the June quarter.
The final thing that Chalmers wanted to do today was to defend the government's record, to say, we knew this was coming and we have taken really careful steps to make sure that we've eased the burden on voters and that we've prepared ourselves for the future. Now, he's done this in a way by essentially saying everything we've done is careful and calibrated. We know what we're doing here. At the same time, he's over-egged the criticism that was levelled at him at budget time back in May. Now, people were saying, look, Treasurer, if you spend a little bit less, that will take the pressure off the Reserve Bank, and it will mean that we might get interest rate relief, which is cuts, a little earlier than you otherwise would get. But instead, the government has pumped in a fair bit of cash into the economy. So you have too many dollars chasing the same amount of things, and we've got the level of demand outrunning the supply capacity of the economy. And that's why we've got persistent high inflation. Even though it's falling, it's taking a long time to get it back down. So what we see essentially is Chalmers trying to stick it to his critics to try and present them as slash and burn, over the top zealots, when what people were essentially saying was try and keep spending moderate, try and keep the surplus if you can, try and limit spending to those areas in which you must, and don't go into new areas that you know is only going to pump up inflation.